All right, guys, welcome back to Revive School. Brand new week, and wow, praise the Lord for excitement about this day. You know, here we are, Psalms 132, 133. It's crazy to think this is the week, Kevin. Kevin, do you have any idea why we should be super excited?
We're going to finish the Psalms this week.
Finish the book of Psalms. Tom Schieffer is in the house. Him and Josh Edwards are going to be helping teach all week with me. Tom, you're actually going to finish up Psalm 150.
I'm excited.
You should be. This has been the, not because it's dragged on like painful, like Job, but like this has been the longest teaching series we've ever done in any book, right, Kevin? Mm-hmm. Nothing's even come close to comparing to this. And so here we are winding down, even in the Songs of Ascent. You know, all last week we were talking about the Songs of Ascent. This week we're going to wrap up the Songs of Ascent as they're singing, remember, up to Jerusalem. And so it just kind of feels like I honestly didn't think that I would enjoy the book of Psalms the way I did. I would say the one theme, yes, our phrase for the book of Psalms is the King of Glory. But, and I'll keep this the theme. I won't even question that. But the one underlining theme that I think that has surprised me, has encouraged me, and has prepared me is that the King of Glory is coming to Jerusalem. It's kind of like, it just feels like so many times, somehow Jerusalem is in the conversation. I mean, think about the Songs of Ascent. The Songs of Ascent is about what? We are going up to Jerusalem, surrounded by the Kidron Valley. You've got the Mount of Olives, you got Mount Zion. And it's like, as people are coming, Kevin, how many times a year are they coming to Jerusalem?
3 times a year.
In this context, in Psalm 132, this is, remember, they're actually singing this. They're singing this in this excitement of, hey, we get to go up to Jerusalem. Now, Psalm 132 is very, very similar to Psalm 89. Now, we talked about how sometimes they're different, sometimes they're similar. Now, this is what we would call a royal psalm. Tom, when we say royal psalm, what is that? To you, what does that look like?
Brings out the king element and the on the throne, all of those kinds of themes.
So that's what you have in Psalm 132, very similar as well to Psalm 89 as a royal psalm. And so, absolutely. So you're going to see a couple words. So Kevin, if you can go to Psalm 89:20. Psalm 89:20, you're going to get one of these themes that you're going to see in the royal psalm, okay, is that there's an anointed one, okay? I have found David my servant. I've anointed him with my sacred oil. So there's this anointed aspect, Psalm 132:10. It says, because of your servant David, do not reject your anointed one. So there's this theme between Psalm 89 and Psalm 132, but I'm really going after, you guys, is that it's a royal psalm, which is pointing to, here it is, the King of Glory, which then ultimately, you guys, what happens? Points to Jerusalem. So it's just kind of this cool flow of who are we talking about. Now, also, on the flip side, when you have a royal psalm, if you have an anointed one, it's kind of like when you have good news, you have to have bad news. When you have an anointed one, you're going to see this theme of an enemy. There's going to be this good and bad. So Kevin, if you go to Psalm 89, 22 and 23. Psalm 89, 22 and 23, the enemy will not afflict him. No wicked man will oppress him. And then verse 23, I'll crush his foes before him and strike those who hate him. So you have this anointed one. Well, he's coming here to do what? To defeat those that are against him. Kind of the emphasis that you'll see in a royal psalm. Kind of a really cool picture, even in this image of Psalm 89, this royal psalm, this messianic picture of David's going to take care of it, and oh, by the way, so is the King of Glory. And guess what? He's going to do it in Jerusalem. So it's kind of like this mentality. They're coming to Jerusalem to get prepared for a whole lot more. They're preparing for a worship that's a lot more. They're going to worship the King here, but oh, by the way, they're going to worship the King there. And so this image of this messianic psalm, it's really a preparation of the anointed defeating the enemy. Now, if you'll go to Psalm 89:24, there's another image here that I think is really fun. And Rhonda Summers was having a dialogue out of Flint, Michigan with me about this as well. And here it is, my faithfulness and love will be with him, and through my name, his horn will be exalted. So there's this horn of salvation that is through this royal psalm, this messianic psalm. If you go to Psalm 132, verse 17, Kevin, please. Psalm 132, verse 17, same thing. There I will make a horn grow for David. I've prepared a lamp for my anointed one. Tom, you take these two, Psalm 89, Psalm 132. When you see this phrase horn, anything come to your mind?
Proclamation. I think horn of salvation is proclaiming that. It's announcing the king. It's announcing the entrance. It's here he comes. Let's let it be known to everybody.
Absolutely. Kevin, can you go back to Psalm 89 for me, verse 24, I believe? It says, through my name, his horn will be exalted. So it's his name will be exalted. That horn there's so many definitions. His strength, his power is some of the imagery here. His salvation actually is in reference there, and even the trust that we have in him. So all of these layers, here's what we're saying, we're putting it in him. Is that a fair statement? Everything, our words, our faith, our trust, our power, our strength, it's all found, our salvation is all found in him. And so the royal psalm, it points to him. Now you can do a really unique study on this, and there's a lot of depth that you can go to it. But then the last thing I want to just say in a royal psalm, and that you'll see in both Psalm 89 and Psalm 132, crazy enough as it sounds, is that you will have, and obvious as it sounds, you'll have the throne. There's this language of a throne. Kevin, if you go to Psalm 89, verse 29, if you don't mind. Psalm 89, 29 says, I'll establish his line forever. Here it is, right? His horizontal, but then his throne as long as heaven lasts. There's the vertical. It keeps going. So the imagery of as we're singing to the Lord, guess what? We're praising him because of he's an anointed one that will crush the enemy. We will find salvation and trust in him through the horn, right? And then you have the throne. And by the way, he's going to have his established kingdom forever. You want to go to Psalm 132, Kevin, verse 11. Kind of a cool picture, really 11 and 12. It says, the Lord swore an oath to David, a promise he will not abandon. I will set one of your descendants on your throne. Continues on in verse 12, if your sons keep my commandment, hopefully we'll get to that, and my decrees that I'll teach you, their sons will also sit on your throne forever. And so there is this image. It's in a really powerful image, you guys, that you will find in Psalm 89 and Psalm 132. So when we have this thought of it's a messianic psalm, a royal psalm, and it's a song of ascent, we're really singing about these four things. At least those four things. So, Kevin, any thoughts on that as you see that?
I was just wondering, is there other royal psalms?
Yes, I don't have a list here, but there are. There's other lists that just walk you through. And some will call them messianic psalms, some will call them royal psalms. But the whole point is to point to where is the king in all of this. Horizontal and vertical. All right, so let's just keep going here if we can. Let's just start digging into the word here, because I think it's really cool, and I like what John MacArthur says in regards to this. And he breaks up the first 5 verses, and here's what he says. It really is, it's a prayer, okay, to remember David. Now, why that's really interesting, why that's important to me, is this. What did we just talk about? What are we going to see in this whole thing? Well, the promises of David. We want to see where is, and so this psalmist, which we don't know the name of, okay? The Song of Ascent is the unknown author. We really don't know. Maybe it was written, maybe, after exile in Babylon to explain the people's call for God to remember its covenant with David. Maybe. So let me slow down and say that again. They've just been set free, and now they're just saying, hey guys, by the way, we got to call out to the Lord, remember your promises. Okay, there's a thought here of, remember, it's this constant going back and remembering it. You know, even to the point where some theologians would even say this is Israel's first prayer again. It's an interesting thought if you want to unpack that even more. But I will tell you this, out of all the songs of ascent, this is the longest one. Now, you could say, whoa, it's not that long. It's only 18 verses. Yeah, that's true. But remember, they're singing this thing, right? So I can't remember the third chorus. Don't worry, I'm sure Josh will probably sing this week when you're in the songs of ascent. And so here's what they're singing. Lord, remember David and all the hardships he endured. It's an interesting line. If they're coming back, right? What are they even talking about, Kevin?
Well, I think it's probably pre his kingship, the struggles he went through with having the weight for the throne to become available till Saul was gone, as Saul chased him.
Okay, you're right. Watch this, okay? Keep going, and here's how it builds. In verse 2, so he endures these hardships, and how he swore an oath to the Lord, making a vow to the mighty one of Jacob. That phrase, just so you know, very rare designation of the Lord. Very rarely, and I really appreciate this observation, because you don't think of God as the mighty one of Jacob. Not naturally. That's not a language that you would see in the Old Testament. You would normally hear maybe God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But very rarely do you hear Jacob.
And yet he was the one that wrestled with God. And there was a lot of wrestling all the way through David's whole reign. Wrestling with sin, wrestling with consequences of sin.
Well, and think about it, Tom, to run with that theory is, if we just said David had all these hardships, why wouldn't they identify a God with a person that is wrestling with him? Right? So it has this mentality. Kevin, if you want to go to Genesis 49:24, it's one of the rare references that will tie in with what we're even talking about here, okay? Here we're talking about Joseph in 22. Joseph is a fruitful vine, right? A fruitful vine beside a spring. Its branches climb over the wall. I love that phrase, by the way. That's the fruit that's extending. That's an incredible teaching on that one. Verse 23, the archers attacked him, shot at him, and were hostile towards him. So who are they hostile towards? In this context, he's talking about Joseph, right? Keep going to verse 24. Yet his bow remained steady and his strong arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. So Tom, your theory's right. Maybe not necessarily because of Jacob, but that's what he's talking about. Joseph went through hardships, but oh, by the way, the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, and it continues on, by the God of your father who helps you, he'll take care of you. That's the mentality. The Almighty will bless you with the blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, and blessings of the breast and the womb. And so here you have this hardship that David is experiencing, and it says the mighty one of Jacob is actually going to bring his blessings from heaven, and he's got your back. Just one more image. Can you go to Isaiah 1:24? I don't know why we're going to hang out here, but we might as well just for a little bit. Remember, they're praying, God, please remember the promises of David. And here's that same thing again, you guys. It says, therefore, the Lord God of hosts, I'm in Isaiah 1:24, the mighty one of Israel. Another name of Jacob is Israel. And if you think about Israel as a country or Jacob as a person, that's all it is. He's constantly wrestling, constantly looking for survival. And it says, the mighty one of Israel declares, I will gain satisfaction against my foes. I will take revenge against my enemies. So when you think of the mighty one of Jacob, it just might be a new term for you to talk to the Lord when you're going through a hard time. And it's here in Scripture. Now watch this. In verse 3, what are some of the hardships? What is really in the way? What is David really driving to do? Well, honestly, you guys, it says, I will not enter my house or get into my bed. I will not allow my eyes to sleep or my eyelids to slumber. I love the fact that he has to say it twice right there. You know, in verse 4, he's like, I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to close my eyes. Like, he just has to say it. In other words, I will not stop. In verse 5, until I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling for the mighty one of Jacob. So the hardship is really finding a home for what?
For the Lord.
For the Lord. For the ark. Like, where can I set up shop for God that can become his place of residence? Can you go to 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 2? I was trying to think of something super cheesy. I think I got there. I think I'm there. You know, the address would be like, you know, one holy land, Jerusalem, Israel, right? That's where can I find an actual location that I can put this? That's what he's looking for. 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 2. Remember, David's desire, you guys, is to do this. So it says, when the king had settled into his palace and the Lord had given him rest on every side from all of his enemies. Verse 2, the king said to Nathan the prophet, look, I'm living in a cedar house while the ark of God sits inside tent curtains. I need a place for God that's better than me. Look what I'm living in. I'm living in a cedar house, but God's in a tent. That bothered him. So when we're talking about the first 5 verses, when this prayer is, they're saying, look how much David went through to find a home for David. To find a home for the Lord. Like, this was the property that he was looking for. And Kevin, you remember this whole story, how he purchased the land? Remember this? Remember the process that he had to go through? He wanted to purchase, in fact, in 2 Samuel 24, It says he purchased land. David had to purchase land, but there was a deal of pain because of, you guys, he couldn't build this. We already know this because of his sin. Because of all of the bloodshed that he had brought on, the things that he had done, he wasn't allowed to do this. And yet he knows that his son can. But just this is the process that they're sounding out. I love what Tom Constable put. He said, David experienced a personal discomfort because he wanted to build a temple. And so he went through great personal sacrifices to prepare for construction, even though he didn't actually get to build it. I've said this in our Bible study. It would be like me saying, all right, I have such a desire to experience the presence of God, but clearly God's not going to let me do that because of my past, but I want it for my generation. That's the mentality, you guys, that all of us should have. What can we do to set the table for the younger generation to experience his presence? That's what David does, and he had to go through a lot of hardships to get to this point. So that first 5 verses is really about praying, God, please remember what David went through. And I love this, you guys, in verse 6 through 10. And what MacArthur says here is what it becomes. It becomes a prayer to bless David's descendants. So we shifted, did we not? We shifted from David to now, what? His descendants. Right? David had this mentality. Now I need you to bless the descendant side. And so how can we work this out? He says in verse 6, well, we heard of the ark in Ephrathah. Okay, it's a region of Bethlehem. Okay, and it says maybe, possibly, that there's always this thought behind this. It's not 100%, because it says that they heard of the ark in Ephrathah, maybe in this area, but then we found it in the fields of Jaar, J-A-A-R. I'm not sure if I'm fully pronouncing that correctly, but here's the cool picture, you guys. This name, it's another name for Kiriath Jearim. Okay? So here you have, we didn't find it in one place, but we found it in another. And their ark rested there, you guys. Ready for this? How long? Do you remember? How many years? Any guess?
Was it 40?
20.
20.
20 years. The ark rested for 20 years after the Philistines returned it. I'm not messing with this thing. You kidding me, man? That's holy. Right? That's the mentality. That's the thought process. And then from there, in fact, let's just go there, Kevin. 1 Samuel 7, 1 through 2. David wanted to build a temple, and then it just said, but we had to go find the ark. So the men of Kiriath Jearim came for the ark of the Lord, took it to Abinadab's house on the hill. They consecrated his son Eleazar to take care of it. Verse 2. Time went by until 20 years had passed since the ark had been taken to Kiriath Jearim. Then the whole house of the Lord, house of Israel, began to seek the Lord. So this is the process. They went to look for it one place. Then they found it in Kiriath Jearim, okay, which is also that term, that title. It actually means city of woods, which I always think is kind of cool. In other words, it's kind of set back. Maybe it's just hidden. Maybe it's not something that stands out. It's 10 miles northwest of Bethlehem, 8 miles northwest of Jerusalem. So then at that point, there becomes a shift. Kevin, if you go to, it's found in 2 Samuel 6. David then brought the ark into Jerusalem. Okay? That's kind of the bigger picture, all right? Now I want to pull back. I want to slow down just for a second. And Kevin, if you'll go to one of our fun, fancy pictures of the ark. Okay, so here's the picture. David wants to build a home for the ark, the presence of the Lord, right? Well, what do they have to do? They have to go find it. Let me back up now. I wanted you to see kind of the end of it. I want to back up just for a second here and kind of want to walk you through. Constable does what's called the journey of the ark. I think this is really cool to get to this point. Okay, first of all, okay, the ark had been in several places before Solomon put it into the temple. Okay, we've already declared that, but the ark went before the children. Now think about this, you guys. The ark went before the children of Israel as they followed the cloud and the pillar, right, in the wilderness. Okay. So that's kind of the presence. The ark went before everybody. That was the symbol of the presence of the Lord. In this, the ark even went before them in the water, right? Into the Jordan River. Possibly it set up shop at Bethel. Possibly then it was temporarily at Mitzpah. It rested in Shiloh. So the journey of this ark, it's continuing to move on. And then remember this, the wicked sons of Eli, they took it. They thought it was going to bring good luck. They took it to fight against the Philistines. The Philistines captured it, and then it was somewhere gone. They couldn't find it for a while, right? And then the Philistines, now to get to the point again, what did they do? They returned it to the Jews, said, we don't want it. And they gave it to the folks at Kiriath Jearim. And then at that point, David then prepared a tent for the ark. Okay, but he failed because he couldn't build the temple, right? So it was a temporary home. Remember this in Obed-Edom? Remember this? The ark went into Obed-Edom for 3 months, and then from Obed-Edom, it went to Jerusalem. Okay, I just wanted to go through this process because when you read through the Psalm 132, and they're singing about David and remembering his promises, and then they're talking about the journey of the ark, you got to remember where it came from. So it says then in verse 7, let us go to his dwelling place. Let us worship at his footstool. Tom Constable says it well. The Israelite pilgrims who sang this psalm, they resolved to go worship God on Mount Zion in Jerusalem because they knew that's where the ark was. Finally, we get to go to a place where it's God's home. He's not moving. He's not in the wilderness. He is there. And that's just a cool picture. Let us worship at his footstool. The footstool mentality is a temple in Jerusalem whose dwelling is in heaven. Now, some would even say, again, it goes to this vertical, horizontal and vertical, his earthly throne and his heavenly throne. It's just a weird image. But this would be the earthly throne mentality. So as they're praying this, they say this in verse 8. Rise up, Lord. Come to your resting place, you and your powerful ark. What in the world is he talking about now? Arise, Lord? Like we're singing, we're going to be coming. What does it say? It says we're going to be coming to the dwelling place. And now he's saying, rise up? Arise, Lord? Kevin?
Again, if this is coming out of exile, the ark's not there. So because the temple's been destroyed and they're going back, so as they're coming into Israel, they're like, come back to bless this place.
Correct. And let me add one thing. Okay, and I didn't know this until I started studying this. Nelson's commentary says it really well. You guys, at this point, they don't have a king. So God, we need you to step up. And by the way, we need you to establish a king based on your promises of David, which goes back to the anointed, the horn, and the throne. So we need you to establish your king and, by the way, experience your presence through the ark. So it's just kind of this, and so then they're saying in verse 9, and then they begin to really reestablish, Kevin, everything that you're talking about. May your priests be clothed with righteousness, and may your godly people shout for joy. In other words, God, we need you to establish it all over again. Right? That would be the mentality. Put your king in place, put your priests in place. We need to experience your presence. Can you get us back to how he used to be? And then in verse 10 it says, because of your servant David, do not reject your anointed one. Now this is a pretty cool picture. I mean, they're saying don't turn away because we can't find anybody. In fact, we really might not be able to see a king right now, but remember what you promised David? It was going to be forever. So what we can't see sometimes is that, well, they might not be the best descendants that we've seen, right? And then it continues on in verses 11 through 18. What you begin to see is really a shift, is a people of the prayer to now the Lord promises David. Now it's the Lord responding. Okay, so I'll just put that up here. Then you're going to begin to see the Lord's promises to David in verses 11 through 18. So then the Lord swore an oath to David, a promise he will not abandon. I will set one of your descendants on your throne. He says in verse 12, if your sons keep my covenant and my decrees that I will teach them, your sons will also sit on your throne forever. Well, I think it's pretty clear that didn't always happen, though. Here you have Jeroboam. Jeroboam, I think we would all say bad. Nadab, bad. Baasha, bad. Elah, bad. Oh yeah, should I just keep going here? Zimri, bad. Omri, bad. Ahab, the worst. Ahaziah, bad. Joram, I like these. When you go Joram and Jehu, this author wrote, bad mostly. And Jehoahaz, bad. And then it just keeps going. Bad. I think you get the point. So if your sons keep my covenant and my decrees, no, that's not working out. And then when you get into this list, right? This is another whole list. Rehoboam, bad mostly. Abijah, bad mostly. Asa, pretty good. Jehoshaphat, good. Joram, bad. Bad. And I love what we don't have. Oh, yeah, here it is. Queen Athaliah, devilish is what they wrote here. And then you have, we already walked through Joash. My point is like it's good, bad. Like, really? And so we want to go back to the anointed that will beat the enemy. The horn of salvation comes through, and your throne is going to be established forever. God, that's the promise that we want you to see come to fruition. In verse 13, he says, for the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his home. So why Jerusalem? Why do we make a big deal about putting an embassy in Jerusalem? Why do we even care about praying for the peace of Jerusalem in Psalm 122? Why? Because that's God's home. The Lord chose this. It is his, that's where he designated his home address here on earth. It's crazy to think, but that never stops. How do we know? Because in verse 14, it says this, you guys, this is my resting place forever. It does not just stop at the book of Malachi. It literally carries on. Oh, and by the way, from when the King of Glory comes in Jerusalem. I will make my home here because I have desired it. Look, I don't know how else to tell you this. It's not where I would pick. I'd like it to be in Dallas. I'd like it to be a little bit more convenient. And oh, by the way, it doesn't always necessarily fit. Doesn't fit in my schedule, doesn't fit into my finances, doesn't fit into whatever you want to say. That's where God says is my home. He desired it. In verse 15, he says, I will abundantly bless its food. I will satisfy its needy with bread. I will clothe its priests with salvation, and its godly people will shout for joy. There is a really, really fun story about shouting for joy. But bottom line is, you guys, you're talking about in the Hebrew to utter loudly, as Nelson's commentary says, or there's the shouts of joy, of hearty, joyful singing. When you have salvation, when you experience newness in your life, it's that Psalm 40, guys, passage, I got a new song in my mouth. And when I got a new song in my mouth, others will see and fear and trust in the Lord because I'm not ashamed about what he's done in my life. And it's the Lord doing the work. He's the one that's giving this to us. He's the one that's giving us these new clothes. And I can't stay quiet about this. That's why it's really hard to stay monotone with Revive School. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise. That's like a meh emoji. And in verse 17 and 18, as we wrap up, there I will make, here in Jerusalem, there I will make a horn grow for David. Here it is. This is what we're talking about. I'm going to establish my covenant with the Anointed One. I'm going to close the deal here, you guys. I have prepared a lamp for my Anointed One. And this image of is in verse 18, I will clothe his enemies with shame, but the crown he wears will be glorious. I'm going to give a crown for this king here and, oh, by the way, now and forever. So regardless of that chart of bad, good, devilish, the King of Glory is perfect. And I've anointed him for this time. So it's a cool picture when you hear about the songs of ascent, people going up to Jerusalem. It really is a preparation for all of us because we'll all be going there in his time. All right, guys, this is Psalm 132. Bless you. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.